Israel liaison to help us, get through this very difficult time, and has come up with some really fantastic programming for the community to come together. And this is our third program that we are hosting. The first was a conversation
What?
with folks who are very personally affected by what's going on, um, and including a former congregant whose cousins are currently held hostage. And the second program was just this past Sunday as part of our mitzvah day, and our rabbi, Deborah, did a very nice conversation with parents and grandparents around how to talk to your kids about Israel. So this is our third program, and Jonathan, we're really thankful to you for putting together what looks like is going to be a very meaningful discussion. Tina, did you want to add anything?
No, you did a great job. You covered all the bases, so thank you.
And if you just bear with me for 1 second, I'm just dealing with someone who's trying to get on here, and then we'll go. And Jessica, I don't know why Vicky and Maxine and Peter are pinned. I don't know if you can fix that or not. Not the one speaking.
When I made you guys, when I made you both co-hosts, I lost my privileges.
All right, hang tight 1 second. Sorry, we're dealing with a.
We're not seeing people pinned, Adam.
Oh, you're not. Okay.
I'm looking at a gallery right now.
Perfect.
Yeah,
okay, great.
too.
Thank you. Let me just do this, and then there we go. Okay. All right, just hang tight 1 second. We'll get going here. I just have to send this link to somebody here real quick, and then we can get rolling. Forward this email. Trying to multitask here. Sorry. Okay, so okay, there we go. We're sent. So good evening, everybody. My name is Adam Friedman. I am a Kol Tikva member. Let me see if I can spotlight myself for everybody here. If I'm able to work correctly. I'm a member of Kol Tikva, and yes, I was tapped on the shoulder when the event happened on October 7th. I'd had a conversation with Rabbi John regarding the need to talk about Israel, to have a forum where we can learn, we can talk about some difficult subjects, and ultimately, being optimistic, talk about how great Israel is. But right now, there is a lot going on. Just from a numbers perspective, since October 7th, 9,500 rockets, over 1,400 Israelis killed, over 7,000 injured, still well over 200 that were kidnapped, and no sign of them at this point. And the most recent number is 200,000 displaced. And of course, both globally and locally, we are seeing an absolute explosion of anti-Semitism. I just was on the ADL website a little while ago. There's been 109 rallies in the United States specifically calling for the death of Jews. So there's a lot going on right now. There's a lot of animosity towards Jews, a lot of negativity. There's a lot of different stories being told. And one of the questions that was brought to me by actually several people at Kol Tikva is, Adam, I want Israel to beat Hamas. We've got to rid this cancer from our world. We know they have to do what they're doing. But I'm also concerned that there may be innocent people that are affected by this in Gaza. And it's a difficult subject because it's military, it's war, and bad things happen. So this ultimately led to a conversation with Jonathan Freund. Jonathan is a temple member, and I'm going to pop him up here right now. Jonathan is a temple member, and we are actually very fortunate to have him here with us this evening to get a little bit of his background here. Jonathan has a master's in education. He was the senior director of the Holy Land Democracy Project at the Jewish Federation, which was an intensive Israel experience for educators at non-Jewish institutions. He's served on the mayor's task force on the Middle East, the Institute of Faith-Based Diplomacy, and the pilot tech study program of New Ground and the Center of Muslim Jewish Engagement. He's a speaker on interreligious dialogue and leadership, anti-Semitism, and the Holocaust at the Claremont School of Theology, Columbia's Theological Seminary, excuse me. And in formal settings, he was the 2021 Ralph Bunchy Guest Scholar at LA City College. And he actually has a history with Rabbi John. I think that predates Kol Tikva, where he created a group called It's a Guy Things Retreat for Fathers and Son. And tonight, the topic of our discussion, and if there's time for questions, we'll do it in a chat box format, so everyone will be muted. But the title of tonight's discussion is Tools for Peacemaking Within Ourselves, Anger, Fear, and Empathy in the Israel and Hamas War. So Jonathan, thank you so much for joining. We appreciate you, and I'm going to turn everything over to you.
Great. Thank you, Adam and Jessica. It's been a pleasure, Adam, getting to know you and talking about this this series and also this session over the last week, which has been fraught. You know, I talked to a friend today, and we were talking about what an effort it is to just stay in the present moment, just be in the present moment. And the problem is the moment changes before you have enough time to stay in it. Not to mention the fact that every moment seems to be multiple moments. Anyway, so it is a challenging time. I very much appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to speak here. Just to emphasize that I am an educator, and Adam touched on a little bit of, I've worked extensively in interreligious dialogue and intercommunal dialogue and engagement and leadership, both around Israel and around issues in Los Angeles, around anti-Semitism, around anti-Muslim Islamophobia, and also stuff that doesn't have to do with hatred, text study, and other kinds of interreligious engagement, and not just with Muslims, with Christians and every denomination of Christianity you can think of. And that was mostly at when I was at the Jewish Federation for about 16 years, excuse me, which was a second career after a career in the film business, which will be a different presentation sometime. So, I can't promise you'll feel better after tonight. So I will try to, as I said, come up with some tools. And these are based on a lot of my work that is an interreligious dialogue. So a lot of this has to do with dialogue, although we're also talking about dialogue within ourselves, as Adam alluded to. And tools can be difficult to use. They can be heavy. They can hurt our hands. They can be loud and hurt our ears. But that's what we are, that's what tonight is about. And I want to say I am not going to talk extensively about the growth or the issues of anti-Semitism that are going on right now, which are frightening. I am not going to talk specifically about the hostages at all. And I'm not going to talk about specifics of what's happening or happened in Israel, some and some not, but that is not because I don't think any of that is important, not because I don't think that there are very clear moral lines to be drawn, which I'll mention at some point, but that the point of tonight is to really talk about how to deal with the complications, as Adam said. So if you hear me avoiding some of these important things, it's not because I don't think they're unimportant. But I want to start actually with something that just happened. As I said, the moment keeps changing, which was, as some of you may have seen, the last night's brawl, if that's the word, last night's sort of fight, fisticuffs that were outside the Museum of Tolerance. I don't know how many people saw about that Gal Gadot is touring with a film put together that is showing in depth and very detailed both IDF video after the fact, but also a lot of the captured cell phone videos that the Hamas terrorists used during their actual assaults. So, and I haven't seen this, but they are showing some of what they're showing people being shot, and I don't know what else, but they are actually showing the footage from October 7th and from the aftermath of October 7th. And for the purpose, as I read, of getting involvement from those who influence makers and whatnot in Hollywood and elsewhere and around Hollywood who may not be involved or engaged yet. And there was a video of some fisticuffs, people fighting right in front of the Museum of Tolerance. I looked at it briefly. And the point I wanted to say is that when we see a lot of these things on television, and I'm going to talk also about the murder of Paul Kessler in a moment, so I will get to that. It's important to often, and as I was looking at this thing last night, and I don't know how many people, I may be speaking to people that haven't seen what I'm talking about, but it's always to look and see, wait, how many people are actually involved? And can you tell which side the two people that are fighting or the three or four people are fighting are on? Can you really tell? And for that matter, can you tell if the person who may be representing Israel may not be somebody that you want representing Israel for you? Also, who else in the frame is either trying to break it up or is just running there to take cell phone video? So there's all these other things that are happening that are going around that are about an event, even a moment, a couple seconds when we see it on TV, on the news. And I have to say, look, I love Gal Gadot, and I think she's wonderful. And I think the fact that she has access to a whole audience of young people, and perhaps especially young women, that might otherwise not be brought into these issues, and how proudly and openly she's talked about being not just a member of the IDF, but the importance. But I also have to ask, and by the way, I am asking because I think it's a question, not necessarily a challenge, which is how many people that are going to show up for this are really showing up that will have their minds changed? I don't know the answer to that, but that's often a question. How many people in any situation are really open to having their minds changed or are there to have their minds changed? Because I wasn't sure when I first saw it, my first attitude was, how many people are coming to the Museum of Tolerance because they don't know what happened on October 7th and feel that they need to actually look at the actual footage of what actually happened? I think it's a valid question to ask. We should always ask. Now, of course, also the Hamas and their supporters' response is, it's propaganda. It's a conspiracy. It isn't real. And it's the same as if, in some ways, you're trying to have a discussion, and I apologize if any of you believers, but trying to have a reasonable discussion with someone who believes in QAnon conspiracy theory, right? People have these firm beliefs, and there's a point at which you're saying, you know what? It's just not worth the energy. I heard Rabbi Daniel Hartman just the other day, who I'm going to quote a couple of times, talk about dealing with the coalition of the evil and the foolish, which is what we're seeing in the streets a lot of, which is there are true evil people. There is obviously Hamas and Iran. We speak a lot about Hamas, but let's not forget that Iran is also involved in this. And there are a lot of young and foolish people. And if we all think back, I think we were all foolish when we were in our teens and in our 20s, and it's very easy to seize onto a cause. And there's a lot of stuff written about why the Palestinian cause, in quotes, is more attractive, more easier to believe in. Not going to go into that. But what Rabbi Hartman was saying is don't bother with the foolish, because they will hopefully become wise. And what we see, like I was saying on TV, is such a minority of people. And they unfortunately get way more attention than they should because of the nature of news, which is one reason why I suggest everyone really ration themselves heavily on what news they watch, or if you do, make sure you watch little bits and pieces of lots of different sources. Now, there was the murder, and let's call it the murder of Paul Kessler in Thousand Oaks, just the other day. There was the murder in Illinois last month of Wadea Al-Fayoueh, 6-year-old boy who was stabbed by his landlord because he was Palestinian Muslim. And this is not a comparison between deaths and victims or why, because I don't believe in that. And that's one of the things I really believe we should not be talking about, is comparing victims and victimhood. But what happens, and this is a phenomenon way beyond Israel and Palestine, or Israel and fill in your favorite blank after that, that the emotions behind our beliefs have way more influence on us than the beliefs themselves, and way more than facts or reason. That we defend our beliefs because we need to defend our feelings, and that those beliefs often come with all sorts of other loaded issues, social and cultural pressure to partake of whatever the group is doing. So that even if one may think something is wrong, it takes an awful lot of courage to say, you know what, I think all the rest of you are wrong, I'm staying home. I mean, think about what it would be like to stand up in Kol Tikva on a Friday night and say, you know what, I believe in Jesus Christ as my savior. You could do it if you really believed it. You would probably not be a member of that group much longer. And that can be very hard to do. Again, which is not to justify the beliefs or the facts, but just to talk about why there is this passion and what's behind it in some ways. And also in terms of on the street, and what's happening now is when temperatures get turned up in a contained space, explosions and eruptions happen. Violence happens, and that's physics. And it's up to each of us, I believe, again, this is where I'm starting from, to turn down the temperatures, to, ease down the fever, calm our emotions, at least in discussions, and at least in terms of engaging others, to reach out, and even if that's only inside our own hearts and minds, to reach out. And I think that's some of the confusion that people are having right now. But I want to make clear, absolutely demonstrate, speak up, carry the flag, go out, be in public, go to DC, say as loud as you can, Am Yisrael Hai. Absolutely do that. Don't argue in the streets. Don't get in an argument with the people that are across the street. Just don't do it. For your sake, for the cause's sake, if I can say it, and for the sake of what's going to end up on TV. I will read, and I was going to say this later, but I will say it now. One of the things that Rabbi Hartman said when I heard him, and again, so everything that I'm referring to, I have made up a PDF with links to it, which will be available afterwards. So all the things you want to hear about and want to see, you will have access to them rather than throwing in links in the chat right now, just so you understand that. One of the things, and I will include Rabbi Hartman's entire presentation, he said, it is a mitzvah to not say what will not be heard or what cannot be heard. If you're in dialogue or if you're talking with someone and they're not going to be able to hear you, there's no point in continuing that discussion because it's actually not a discussion. Let me read a statement from some of you that came from two professors on the Berkeley campus who are both at the Helen Diller Institute. Islamic professor, I don't know exactly what, well, he's a Hatem Bazian. He's a lecturer of Middle Eastern languages and cultures, Asian American, Asian diaspora studies, and Ron Hassner, professor of Israel studies. And they're well known, and this is what it says to our students. We are two professors on this campus who disagree vehemently about everything. But we have always treated one another with respect and dignity. We love this campus and its diverse communities and all of our students and are heartbroken to hear of incidents of near violence between students in recent days. Period. We will not tolerate our students harming one another. Disagreement and differing points of view are an essential part of campus life, and we expect that you treat one another with the same respect and dignity that we are modeling here. Now, would all campuses had a statement like this? And I think it's relevant, obviously, beyond campuses, or perhaps particularly on campuses. But that's also the point that I'm speaking to, because that's what my experience was. How do you stay talking with and respect someone who you disagree with vehemently? Now, I am not talking about the evil and the foolish again. I'm talking about people that will actually talk with you, even if you're going to say, you know what, I disagree with you. Anyone ever tried to convince a couple to stay together or to actually break up and divorce? If you have, let me know what kind of success you had. I'm going to make this point. I have these good friends, Diane and Jeff, who I know very well. Jeff is an old friend, close friends. He was the best man at my wedding. We are longtime Mets fans, which is a suffering and complication unto itself. And they were very firmly committed to never getting married, both for their own reasons and also, and now this is years ago, I'm talking 15 plus years ago, until LGBTQ people could get married. They said we were not going to get married, or we were not going to have, and we were not going to have children. They said both of those. And we had long talks about that. And they actually did end up having children. And they got married afterwards because they had children. They wanted the children to have parents who were married. And Jeff said to me at one point, and I actually remember this moment, that the thing that really got to him, and I am patting myself on the back, but I'm using it as a model, sort of, it's not a one-to-one, but I said, any kid of yours would be a really great kid. And that spoke to the emotion of the reality of parenthood, not to this is why you should have children. This is what's important about children. Oh, you'll have the greatest time. Oh, it's the most wonderful thing you'll ever do. Oh, we should populate the earth, whatever it was. I was speaking to something else, and I didn't intend to be getting through to him, but I use that just as a little model of a way to speak to people in terms of what the feelings are, to really find out what the feelings are underneath and to speak to the emotions of it. So, first week of October, my wife and one of our daughters, we went to Vermont, which we do every year. We have a house in there, longtime family house in Vermont, generations in my family. It was the first time we'd been there during fall foliage in Vermont, and it was a great couple of days. Started out, we went apple picking, we drove up Mount Mansfield. It was wonderful. The colors were all at their peak. And then on Saturday morning, I picked up my phone to look at baseball scores, and you know what I saw. And October 7th was happening as that time. It was ongoing when I first saw it. And my wife can tell you what my face looked like when I walked into the room and told her what was happening. And for the rest of that week, I was between, I'm here in Vermont where I wanted to be with the foliage, and oh my God, I'm also there. And I was in pain for that. And yet I also said, I can't do anything about it. And I said, I can't pay attention to this anymore, because initially it was hour by hour by hour updates. And then of course, bombardment started. And I was guilty looking at the foliage, but I had to. So I was torn in that place because I was powerless. I had this pain. It was deep inside me and very internal and personal. And yet what it was about was so distant. And this is before stuff was happening on the streets here. So it really was distant, and I was really powerless. And I was scared, and I am scared. As a supporter of Israel and a Jew and an American Jew and a supporter of humanity, I felt helpless, and I, in many respects, still feel helpless. And there's little, if anything, I can do that will affect what's happening still over there. None of us really can. It's up to those involved, with help from the US and Europe and the Arab states and others, can agree on a unified approach to create some kind of Marshall Plan for the day after. But the actual end of the hostilities in any warfare is going to be between the combatants itself. And I don't mean at this point, I am not equating Hamas with Israel. I am not taking a position on which is, well, I do have a position. Obviously, I believe Israel should be doing what it's doing. Let's just say that, and we can talk more about that. I just don't want there to be any misunderstanding about this. But my point is that we are powerless to make the changes there. Unless we go and fight, or unless we go and help the wounded in one way or another. I'm equally scared, I have to say, especially now, how this will affect our 2024 election in this country, which could fundamentally change our country for potentially ever, way beyond the issues of Israel and Gaza. I spend time consciously avoiding the news, and I use that word advisably, at the same time as I do feel a duty to bear witness. There is no negotiating with Hamas. There is no negotiating with that kind of evil. Some organizations that are dedicated to the murder and removal of all Jews and other Israelis, the barbarity of those atrocities, and the barbarity of continuing to hold hostages must be vocally and unequivocally condemned without adding or equivocating or generalizing to anything else, ever, period. And there's no such thing as a true ceasefire with Hamas, and calling for one, I believe, is irresponsible, or at the very least misguided, because those protests for the ceasefire and any cessation are part of Hamas's strategy. It also blames the victims who were beheaded and burned by equating them, their lives and their ideals with Hamas. And I knew on October 7th that we were going to be right here, right now, that this was part of what would happen. This was part of Hamas's strategy. I had no idea to the extent that it would be the way it is, because we, even on October 7th and October 8th, had no idea to the extent of what that was. We also know that Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. It really absolutely does not, or the majority of Muslims. And it does not care about them except as cannon fodder. And we know that what Hamas's strategy and Iran's strategy is for exactly to happen what is happening in the US right now. For us to tear ourselves apart. First of all, to hide among civilians, have Israel attack civilians, have thousands of lives lost. Each one of those lives, as I said, is a bullet, as far as they're concerned, that's fired back at Israel. And they're waiting for everybody to turn on Israel and turn on ourselves. Jews versus Jews, and Jews versus others, and others versus Jews, and rage and fighting in the streets and on social media and everyone else. That's what they want to do. They want to damage America from inside itself. Now, that does not change the horror for those who are dead and wounded and suffering in Gaza. It does not eliminate or affect or equivocate the trauma of the missiles and explosions. And I know that's why many of you are here, because you feel that. And we could not ever of us, I think, dream of telling a mother who lost her home and her children to an Israeli airstrike that they would still be alive if Hamas terrorists hadn't attacked a kibbutz or a music festival. I hope we wouldn't say that. That would be obscene to say to someone in that position. And by the way, the people of Gaza know far more about the brutality of Hamas than we do, or at least as much, living in a totalitarian Stalinist state that they essentially are in. And we can also say, and here I am paraphrasing Rabbi Daniel Hartman, who's the leader of the Hartman Institute in Israel, in Jerusalem, and a very prominent Israeli rabbi and scholar, that part of the failure of the current Israeli leadership was not just military to protect its citizens, but was also a failure to protect Gazans and a failure of Jewish values. He was saying that what Israel did after the Second Intifada was wall itself off and depend upon its military and technology, and to say to the Palestinians, a plague on both your houses, you guys fight each other, and we're going to stay as protected as we can in here. And this is Rabbi Hartman who's saying, he's saying that was a mistake. And that was a failure of Jewish values, because we allowed this wound that Gazans were feeling to fester. They allowed, even if it was unintentional, the moral depravity of their education to exist. And a generation or more has gone by that has only known Hamas leadership. And in that kind of a repressive culture, of course, you're going to end up with people, primarily young men. That's all they have to believe in, is what Hamas tells them. And their only way out, they are told, is to kill Jews and kill Israelis. And we should be appalled at that. And it does not excuse any of the acts, but to understand where it comes from, it is let me come back to my place here. It doesn't fully excuse or explain anything that actually happened, right? Any more than the Treaty of Versailles fully explains Nazi atrocities. But it's also wrong to not see those as elements in the current circumstances. And the context of what Rabbi Hartman was saying, and I'm repeating, is that there has to be a new way of thinking on the other side when this war is done. There has to be a new way of thinking about how we Israelis, he's saying, deal with Palestinians. Because what we were doing the past 10, 20 years has clearly not worked. And if anything, they are in a worse, more dangerous situation now. And it hurts me to say that. And I find it very difficult to try to keep in mind the idea of a peaceful resolution. And I much rather believe in a simpler version, to pluck one or two positions or perspectives that I can hold that will make me exclusively right about everything. But that's a hubris. As David Remnick in the New Yorker wrote, there were, of course, facts, many of them unknown, but the narratives came first, all infused with histories and counter-histories, grievances, and 50 varieties of fury, all rushing in at the speed of social media. People were going to believe what they needed to believe. So, how do I do better? How do I think forward? How do I have a dialogue with myself? What tools for peacemaking within myself, within my community, whether it's a synagogue community or a community only of Jews, or whether it's the outside community in Los Angeles. One of the things I did relatively soon afterwards was I called a very close friend of mine who's a Palestinian American. Her grandfather lost his land in the 1947 war, family, home, and land, during the War of Independence, or the Nakba, as Palestinians called it. She is Palestinian American Muslim. She's dedicated her life to interfaith dialogue and runs a interfaith organization here in Los Angeles. She and I have been friends for a long time. And when I reached out to her and we were on the phone, we were on Zoom, and she said, Jonathan, I just have to warn you right out front that this grief for everything is so great that I'm going to be in tears while we're talking. I guarantee you that's going to happen. And it did, but we kept talking. And we're friends. We've talked about all sorts of things other than interfaith dialogue. And I want to pick out one thing that she was telling me about, which is that on October 7th or October 8th, she has school-age children, elementary-age children. And she said they came to her and they were saying, Mom, I'm paraphrasing, how can Hamas, who is Hamas, how can they be doing that? This is not Islam. This is not what you have taught us. This is not what we have learned. So there she was having to explain, can you imagine trying to explain that to your teenage children? what Hamas was and why Hamas was doing was not Islam, and this is how they feel about Israel. And once she went through that explanation with them, they then go to a Muslim school, she says, where they encounter a whole lot of other opinions amongst other Muslim kids coming from other Muslim parents and also teachers. And her children are representing or trying to represent, of course, what exactly they believe and what their mother has believed, but they are going through that sort of torture and pain themselves. And they're coming home and telling her about it. So here's this woman, here's this friend of mine who is dealing with this on a professional level, on her own personal level, having devoted herself to what she's been devoted herself, and as a parent. So that's the kind of complications that lots of us are going to, and that reached me so deeply, I have to say, what she was saying. And let me get to, having said all that, some tools. I always believe in visuals, those of us who are visual learners as well. I will try to keep an eye on the time here. That was my 10-minute introduction I just gave you, and it's now 35 minutes after. So Lucia will be able to tell you all about my predilections as far as that's concerned. Anyway, without further ado, this again comes from a lot of my work in interfaith dialogue. So some of this language will be about dialogue, but I want us to think about it in terms of dialogue within ourselves and whatever dialogue we might be having outside. And I mean dialogue, not arguing, like I said, across the street. Dialogue within Kol Tikva, within your family, with your friends, and with non-Jews, others you may know. Okay? These are sort of the 5 things. I break it down by 1, don't talk about it. Well, you can read that. I don't need to read it to you. Those are the 5. So what do I mean by don't talk about it? I also mean don't think about it. Don't self-talk about it, at least not all the time. As I said, I gave you that line already about it's a mitzvah not to talk about things that cannot be heard by somebody else. If you are going to be talking, you establish trust and understanding first. Talk about things that involve your lives. The people that I have the best interfaith dialogue and work with and have for 15 years, we spend so much time, first of all, not talking about Israel and Palestine. We all agree that that should not be the number 1 subject of discussion. It is now for good reason, but normally it should not be, and normally hasn't been. Not even talk about interfaith dialogue all the time, but to talk about our families. Talk about the Dodgers or the Mets or the Bruins and the Trojans, whatever your things happen to be that involve your lives, and go out and do something and break bread together. And for ourselves, go outside and breathe. One of the things I said to my friend, who I just talked to you about, is I said, you know what? We were in the middle of a discussion. I said, you know what? Can we just go for a walk? And she said, that'd be great. So we're making plans to just go for a walk. Give yourself that time, whether it's looking at the foliage or saying, you know what, there are other things and I am powerless. And it's okay to not give 100% of my attention to this, because that will only wear me out. And that does not help my cause, whatever my cause is. If you are going to talk about it and you are thinking about it, put the end at the beginning, by which I mean, what is the goal or resolution? What do I want to see the morning after? What is the 1 or 2 things I really care most about? And focus on those, and or at least start there and work backwards. Know what those are and to share it. Because as a for instance, and this is what I say in interfaith dialogue, or even between Jews, if you believe in a maximalist Israel, all of biblical Israel, and I don't, or you believe, from the river to the sea, and I don't, well, then what's the point about talking about walls and settlements and anything else? Let's talk about what the ultimate goal is. history is complicated and people want to try to simplify it all the time. History has no beginning and it doesn't move backwards. And it contains facts and reality and narrative, and those are different. And what I mean in the difference between facts and reality there are things that happened, yes, absolutely. But those had different real effects on people. And how people perceive those facts and that reality depends on some of those other factors I were talking about. One of the things we emphasized, Lucia can attest to this in our work, even though it's Israel education, is that 1948, 47, 48 was the War of Independence for Israel. And it was the Nakba for Palestinians, or the Palestinian Arabs, which means catastrophe. And it is both. And we have to accept that it's both. And so do Palestinians. The facts and what happened mean different things to different people. And any peace or justice you want has to work for everybody. It has to be practical. It has to really be possible. And ideally, obviously, with less bloodshed than is happening now. Sit down, sort of said before, calm down. Those of you, I'm sure those of you who have been in any kind of a relationship, you know the differences between an argument that happens when you're standing up in the kitchen versus one when you're sitting down on the couch. It's another way of turning down the temperature, right? Calm down, sit down for yourself or with someone else. Really think about what words mean and what they mean to others before you say them. Define your terms. If we're going to talk about occupation, let's talk about which exactly land we're talking about is occupied and since when and why first, before we talk about pro-anti occupation, right? Same for colonialism and genocide and indigenous and Zionism and on and on. Know what those words actually mean and avoid being inflammatory. Simply to, we wouldn't do this, but to talk about genocide or to refer to what's happening now in Gaza as a Holocaust, that's inflammatory. Don't do things like that. I don't think we would. I'm using that as an example. I said before, find out what the feelings of the person are behind their opinion. There's a lot of research, by the way, that's gone into that. It's called deep canvassing and other things about why people believe the way they do and the real way to engage people, to have them at least examine their beliefs and possibly change their mind. And it doesn't have to do with facts and opinion and even reasoning. It starts with people's emotions, why they feel the way they do. Die Mensch. I don't think you can read that all for yourself. Don't take refuge in pro-anti in sides or saying I'm exclusively right or all of this belongs to Israel or anything, all Palestinians, all Israelis, all Jews. We all know it's far more complicated than that, but be very careful in the language that we use. If you're going to be angry, and anger has a place, I'm not saying that people shouldn't be angry, shouldn't be enraged about a lot of what's happening now. But if it's going to be expressed, try to make it productive and to serve a solution rather than just be rage, because otherwise we risk explosions, tempers, fevers, and people who are shouting and fighting and not hearing each other. And allow your heart to contain multiple truths. My first trip to Israel, which was when I was in my 40s, on a small synagogue trip, Wilshire Boulevard Temple, which I belong to at the moment. And a trip to Israel, it's a long plane flight. You get there first thing in the morning, you're dizzy, and I'm getting out and I'm going through Ben Gurion Airport and I'm going, oh my God, I'm in Israel, and look at this stone and look at this in Hebrew and what am I hearing, and oh my God, and it's a beautiful morning, the sun just come out, and we got in this van. Like I said, it was a very small trip, and we're driving around and we end up going through Tel Aviv, and I saw this, not this exact picture, but I saw laundry hanging up there. And I actually had this thought of like, wow, people are doing laundry. Because if you don't hear about laundry on the news, right? You don't hear about real people going about their lives in Israel. And that's the thing that struck me, is I had to go there, and this is true for anywhere, to really understand, oh, you know what? People are here going about their lives. They aren't just all on CNN. They aren't just all involved in whatever it is. They are trying to go about their lives like you and me. They want a good job. They want their children to have a better life than they had. They want good education. They want to come home and binge Netflix. That's what almost the vast majority of people want. And many of those who don't are ideologues who cannot be reached, or people who have been poisoned and haven't found or been given to be an antidote yet. And what's incumbent upon us, these are rules that we have in interfaith work, is to not see the marginal and the extremists as the majority. To constantly remind ourselves of that, and to not blame all citizens for the actions of their government or leaders. And no matter what lever or ballot you punched in the last 16 years, we all know what that's like in this country too, right? And by the way, we don't want people from Israel or New York or anywhere else telling us in Los Angeles how to handle our homeless problem, right? We don't want people from outside telling us they know better than we do. We were going to say, you know what, you come live here for a while, and then you talk to me about it. When is something anti-Semitism and non-anti-Semitism? Now, it's interesting because a legitimate critic of Israel or anti-Semitism, I usually use this to present to people that are non-Jews so that they will know in terms of what they say. But I think it's also incumbent upon us in terms of what we hear. When is something legitimate criticism of Israel, and when is it anti-Semitism? And let's also remember that anti-Semitism means Jew hatred. And we should say it. That's why the word was coined. It's a whole other history. It was coined as a euphemism for Jew hatred, literally. But to be demonized, to apply the kind of double standards, or to be delegitimized. And I will say also, parenthetically, all the text from these slides I'll make available as well afterwards. But demonized, to hold one party completely responsible, double standards, harsher criteria than you would on other nations that are engaged in somewhat vaguely similar or in a vaguely similar situation, and delegitimized, saying that this one nation has no legitimacy, but other nations do. Here's the thing, though, we can apply this to Palestine too, the way we talk about Palestinians and what their life is going to be like afterwards. And any thinking Israeli that we speak with, that you talk to, is going to say, we have to find a way to live with the Palestinians. And that means find a way for them to live in a way where they feel self-actualized, and they too feel that they have a future. And I think this can apply in many other ways as well. So you can use that as a test in terms of what you hear and what you say. And again, let me just stop and also say, inside our own heads, right? Not just with others. And I think, I hope that these things are also like a way of going, okay, let me stop myself and let me think, okay, and it will be a way of going forward that will be less torturous for you. I won't go through all of these in the interest of time. I was trying to come up with positive and negative mitzvot, not really commandments, but some of the things I've covered. Some of these, again, one of the ones that I think is very important, I sort of touched on this before, is stop looking at and sharing the photos and stop telling the horror stories. We know them. Anyone that is has any influence is a thinking person knows them. It's great that they're there. It's important that they're there for history. They need to be revisited. They need to be as important part of history as are films of the concentration camps. But you're not getting anywhere by sending those around and looking at them. It's only causing more pain and anger. And those are two of the things we want to avoid most of all. Don't argue with haters, trolls, and fools, sort of said that. If you're going to be on social media, don't argue with those people. Try to set up more positive links. Create a network that is sharing more positive stories and build up the likes and whatnot that way. I am not on X Twitter, so I don't know anymore how it works. But if you're on social media, rather than arguing, create a positive presence. Fight for an Israel that is a blessing, not just for the Jewish people, but for the entire world, which comes from our deepest, most beginning foundations of our Torah, right? Be a blessing a light unto the nations. Remember the widow and orphan, because you have been slaves in Egypt. Do not blame people for the suffering, and do not define others people's stories or situations for them. One of the things that infuriates me more than anything, and should you, is when someone says, oh, that's not anti-Semitism. I'm not being anti-Semitic. If I were to say, oh, I'm not being harassing, you're not a Me Too victim, I'm just kidding around with you. What would the reaction be to that? Well, don't be sure you're not doing that for other people. Don't be telling, as some people do, Palestinians that they never had a country. Just stop doing it. Whether it's true or not, it's irrelevant. It's not where we're going forward. Whatever we end up for, stop saying that. All that does is spread hate and enmity and tell them that they have no right to exist, or at least that's how it can be heard. Do not lose hope. I told Adam that there was a line in the Talmud that said you were forbidden to lose hope. And then, of course, I couldn't find it. But I would say that the entirety of Jewish law that we understand and values is essentially, you can also bring it down to do not lose hope. And by the way, it's horrendous and awful. There are no words for the atrocities that we are suffering and that others have suffered and what we're suffering inside. We're still here. We have one of the most powerful countries in the world, which was not true during the Holocaust, was not true during the pogroms in the 1800s, which was not true during the Crusades, which was not true when the Romans invaded, right? It's true now. So have hope, because it's with hope that we can make a better tomorrow. I know that sounds like a sermon, and a cheap sermon maybe. It's I believe it is a truth. And another way of thinking about that is especially the first sentence there. Our humanity is not tested in normal times. We don't have to prove what's important to us. It's only at times like this. Something similar I've heard, and I believe I've seen this attributed to Moshe Dayan, great Israeli general, who said, you don't make peace with friends. You only make peace with enemies. How much? Well, you can see the rest of that. So, and again, if we were in a different situation, I'd say, okay, let's unpack that. How does that apply? Does that not apply? Can we, is our humanity being tested, and how is it being tested by what we're witnessing in Gaza right now? And I'm asking the question, and we could really unpack it if we wanted to. But let me add this to this then, okay? This is a quote from Khaled Abu Awad. I don't know if anyone knows who Khaled Abu Awad is, but let's just ask ourselves, does my feeling about that quote change even a little bit because of who said it? Do I have even a momentary pause of going, wait a minute, what was the context? Does that change how I felt about that quote when I didn't know who said that? Because I think it does. I would not be surprised if it does. It would be natural if it did. But these are the things to recognize. You know, the other day I ordered sushi, and my wife and I, and the DoorDash thing came up and it said, Mohammed has picked up your order. Now, I wasn't worried about the Muhammad who was going to show up at my door. I wasn't worried that he was going to see the my mezuzah. But I had a thought that I would not have had otherwise. And I didn't hate myself for it. I was like, used words that I won't use word now to say, what's going on in this time now where this happens, that a man's name on a DoorDash thing who's going to be bringing me food does this to me, no matter how much kindness I had out of that. So this stuff goes on, and it's this constant sort of like, okay, like I said, go outside yourself and take a breath. First of all, it's okay that that happens. That's what our brains do, right? But, you know, so I'll tell you who Khaled Abu Awad is. He was the founder, co-founder of this organization, this amazing organization in Israel called Roots, Judur Shorshim, which mean roots in Arabic and Hebrew. I also didn't do it, but I was thinking if we had more time, I would have showed you the photo of him without the quote. If I just showed you just the quote of with his name and his face, what would your thought there be? I'll just leave that thought there. Roots is a grassroots organization of settlers in the West Bank, settlers, and the Palestinians that live next to them. And these people from these two villages have gotten together and they've said, leadership is not going to do it for us. We have to make peace and cooperation and live together ourselves. And you have Rabbi Hanan Schlesinger there on the left, who is a settler from Brooklyn, like the stereotype of what you would say the worst possible settler. And you have, that is Ali Abu Awad, not Khaled. The Abu Awad family is a very big family in Palestinian society, who, as a teenager, was throwing petrol bombs at Israeli soldiers and spent time in jail. And they both finally said, you know, enough of this. Rabbi Schlesinger told me, he said, I was walking by my neighbors for years and I knew nothing about them. And I said, what kind of Jew am I if I'm walking by my neighbors and I don't know anything about them? And Ali at one point said, you know, this isn't doing any good. He had whatever realization he had. And they are now doing this, and they have this dialogue, which is incredibly painful. And I will send you links of some of the public dialogues they had. Then they keep it going. The point is they sit there. And as you see on the left, they have camp for their kids. And their slogan, two of them, we refuse to be enemies. And the land does not belong to us. We belong to the land. Emphasis on we both belong to the land. And if you flip that around the way they did, rather than the land belongs to us, we belong to the land, it makes such a huge difference in the way you think about things. So words have meanings, right? And it just turning that sentence around just a little bit. And they both have agreed we both belong to this land equally. We both deserve the same equality. We deserve the same thing for each other. And we're going to help each other as best we can. And we're going to stay in this conversation. So this isn't an organization, one of the organizations to look for, I said, in terms of keeping hope. They're there. And they've been doing this for years. And they are a great place, if I can make a pitch, to support, or at least go on and look and see the work they do. Check out some of the conversations that they've been having and that they're presenting online Zooms for us to read, listen to right now about how they're dealing with this in a time of war. Roots. The link is there. I'll give it to you now. It's friendsofroots.net, not org. That's different Roots, but friendsofroots.net. And again, I want to emphasize, because they are there, I'll just read to you. Their core values include mutual recognition of Jewish and Palestinian belonging, openness to change and growth of ourself and our collective identities, agency and responsibility of ordinary people, opposition to violence, partnership, freedom, security, and mutual flourishing for all, working within a broken reality without accepting it. How's that for being Jewish? Working on the local level to address systemic problems, deeply engaging religion and religious leaders, searching for commonality, reducing hate, and healing trauma. Another organization, this one up north, that has been around for about 60 years, Givat Haviva. They have all sorts of initiatives. They've had an Arabic studies program for 60 years. It's a Jewish organization, started as a Jewish organization. They have this high school of students from all over the world that won the 2001 UNESCO Prize for Peace and Education, something like that, Education and Peace. The two other photos are coming from right now. They are hosting 260 evacuated Israeli citizens, which includes Arabs. Not only giving them accommodations, there is a mental health clinic with treatment rooms. There's a kindergarten run by professional educational staff. They have space for alternative treatments, such as acupuncture. They have a center for haircuts. They have an art center to process trauma and the help of an art therapist, ceramics, and more. They have a boutique clothing for families who only arrive with the clothing on their back. There's a cultural hall with 2 performances a day. First to 6th grade school, a clubhouse for teenage activities, daily athletic activities. They have a study day that's promoting Arab employment in the labor market, preparing Arab students for higher education during the crisis, so that to reduce potential conflicts on campus by promoting understanding and empathy, social media campaign for inclusiveness in the labor market, and a professional capacity program. Professional capacity for Jewish and Arab educators to provide them the tools and support once schools reopen. They have 2 separate links there. They'll be on the page. One is to their basic program, which again, as you see, there's been a shared society. We have a shared future, and they've been believing and working in that for decades. And they have an emergency response page as well. But as you can see, and I want to point out, if you look at just the photo on the right, remember I was talking about looking at photos and reading photos? Well, you've got Jews and you've got Arabs and who knows who else, what other ethnicities there, and a lot of them are laughing and smiling. And this photo was taken within the last couple of weeks. And I don't know what they're sharing, what they're doing. Again, those are just 2 models that I hold up to people even before this crisis. And we visited them. We visited Givat Haviva, as Lucia knows. We have visited Roots in the past. They're amazing programs, both of them. And I'm sure none of you have ever heard of them. You would never see them on CNN or anywhere else, right? These are the things you need to look at and hold on to. I won't go through all of this. This is off my webpage. I put it right here. I would just make sure you're seeking true dialogue, and again, with yourself. You're not just arguing with yourself. You know, that's a good thing anyway, the mindfulness thing. Demand respect and moral clarity, and be dedicated to viable peace and justice for everyone in anything you do, and everything you do. Let's close with some Torah. This one is referred to a lot. O Adonai, save me from treacherous lips, from a deceitful tongue, meaning my own. What can you profit? What can you gain, O deceitful tongue? And the meaning here, again, if we had time, I would say let's unpack this. But think of treacherous as in the treacherous shores, the treacherous rocks, not treachery as in treason. And the same thing with deceitful, not treasonous, but dishonest and disingenuous. When am I being that way with myself or with others? think about what I say, think about what I post, especially think about, before I click send. Too long have I dwelt with those who hate peace. I am all peace, but when I speak, they are for war. Now, that could not be more relevant and painful and something that we could really focus on and get really angry and be righteous with. And maybe we should, maybe we could. But one of the ways that this is interpreted, and I apologize for not taking time to really unpack it, is that the important part of this verse, as is also put, is I am all peace. No matter that when I speak, they are for war. I am all peace, no matter what. I'll just put these on and you guys can read these yourself. And look, I will say this, though. Obviously, there's some enemies who cannot be turned into friends, as I said. So think about it as the people who I think are enemies who may not be. And by the way, actually, I do want to, one thing I meant to refer to is, and I did not put this on the sheet yet. I will always update that sheet. Derek Black, write down the name Derek Black. Briefly, he grew up the son of Don Black, who was the founder of Stormfront, which is the most virulent anti-Semitic organization that there was in the US, maybe still is. Really the center of believing that Jews are not white and are causing the degeneracy of white America. And Derek was his son. And Derek grew up groomed to be the heir apparent. And as a elementary and young teenager pubescent, he gave these great, powerful anti-Jewish speeches, and people loved him. And again, that's all he grew up and all he grew up knowing. And he went to this small college in Florida to study European history because he believed, and his father believed, that if you're going to be representing European white race, you should know about Europe. And while he was there, what happens when you go to college? Well, as can often happen, you start meeting people who are different than you. And he met a lot of people that was different with him, and he started challenging his own beliefs, and he did not tell people who he was after a while. And he was invited by a friend to Shabbat dinner, someone who had regular Shabbat dinners and included non-Jews, not knowing who Derek Black was. And he came and he kept going. And eventually there were people there who found out, oh my God, this is who this guy is. And they said, I'm not going to be around him anymore. I can't be friends. I'm not going to come to sit at Shabbat table with him. And the man who, the student, I think it was a student who hosted those Shabbat dinners, said, no, he's still welcome here. He's been coming. There's nothing he said here. He's still welcome. Now, leaping forward, Derek Black is one of those people who's done a complete 180. The book about him is called Rising Out of Hate, The Awakening of a Former White Nationalist. He speaks, he's interviewed by Anderson Cooper in January of 2021. He has been at the forefront of talking about what life was like growing up for him, what white nationalist beliefs are, and how he has changed. So enemies can be turned into friends. And it so happened that this happened because of Shabbat dinner. Here's the last line I'll give you. Now, for us, I will change the language there a little bit. This is my version. I think that's what we're called to do, and to remind ourselves inside that that's how we need to treat ourselves as well. This is a wall at a kibbutz very near Gaza called Path to Peace, as you see in Hebrew, Arabic, and English. Those are mosaics that you can go and place on yourself if you've ever visited there. That's it. Ran a little bit over an hour, I see. I am happy to take questions that people have. I don't know if you want to read them, you want me to go through them. I
Yeah,
see
if
some in the
anyone
chat.
has any specific questions, if you want to place them in the group chat, there's a little button at the bottom of your Zoom. Or if you think of something else down the road, Jonathan's email, you can see it here, jonathan@jgfreund.com.
Yes, I am. As you may have noticed, I'm always happy to talk. But actually, I promise I'm a good listener too. So
Well,
anything.
I think the group is really just processing everything you told us, Jonathan. You certainly gave us a lot to think about. Speak up. You mentioned early on, go to Washington, D.C. There's, I believe, something next week there, and there's a lot of people are going. And actually, a question did come up from Susanna. What do you do with anger? Anger about what happened October 7th. Thank you.
Well, what I would say is, and I really don't mean to be flip about this, so please apologize. I would say grab on to whatever made sense in for me, whatever I just said. If there's anything in any of that hour and 20 minutes that helps you and makes sense, that's what to do with it, because that's what I'm trying to do with mine. I do a lot of teaching and studying of Holocaust, and I am not comparing this to the Holocaust, and Holocaust scholars would tell you not to. But I read things that I wish I'd never read. And I read things that enrage me and make me weep. And I think it's okay to weep. And it is okay to rage. I know I was saying govern your anger. I would just find a way that it helps you and just doesn't eat at you. Some people box. Some people, go hit a ball against a wall, go out and scream. Beyond that, in terms of what's productive, the only thing is going to say, okay, what can I build out of this? How can I help either heal myself or others, or what can I build out of this? And so I would say, get involved with Roots or Givat Haviva to whatever way you can. This is what I want to do with my anger, because I don't want it to eat at me. And I will repeat, it's unbearable. There are no words for the atrocities. It's as you can see, I'm not angry about it. I hope you understand. I just don't want it to destroy me or even destroy this moment, I guess is what I would say. So, Susanna, I don't know if any of that helps.
And there's another question that came in. Thank you so much, Jonathan. How do I explain to people who think Israel is being a colonizer, that they're just fighting for their right to exist, especially when there is a prime minister, Benny, who really isn't supportive of so much? Sorry, I have to move my screen here. I think people in the US would be more supportive if there was a different prime minister. Your thoughts? And that came from Lucia.
Whoa, that's a lot. Number one, first of all, who is it that you're talking to? And I'm not telling you to say, like I said, if it's someone that you can actually have a discussion with and a dialogue with, then proceed with what I'm going to say. But example I gave before, if there's not going to be any agreement on even what the terms mean, walk away. All you're going to do is aggravate yourself and make yourself further angry. And you know what? That doesn't help Israel. That doesn't help our relationship. It's not that it's bad for Israel. It's just, if there's someone you can actually tell them what the actual definition of colonization is. That it's about a nation, an actual nation that goes and plants itself in another nation and absorbs all that resources and takes it home with them. I mean, what? And takes prisoners and takes captives back with them. Colonization is the British in India. It's the French in Algeria. It's the British in New England, right? They all had countries to go back to. The Jews, if we're talking about Israel, if we're talking about Israel as the country, forget about the land for the moment. If we're talking about Israel, the country, those Jews didn't have a country to go back to, the ones from Europe and the ones expelled from Arab countries. So that's A. Let's really talk about what colonization actually means. B, the majority of the population does not have European blood in Israel. It's from North Africa and Iraq and Arab lands mostly, or at least half. There are people living there who can trace their lineage in the land further back than people with Mayflower lineage in this country to having lived there. So there have always been Jews living there. There were 2 Jewish nations there for well over 500 years. And it was the colonizing Romans who came in and destroyed it. You can hear, Susanna, can you hear me? I'm angry, right? You know, so let's define terms. Now, if someone's not going to agree to even have that discussion, you know, it's a question of whether someone really wants to learn or does someone want to fight with you. I forgot the rest of that. I got hung up on the colonization. And it also means, like, let's, you know, I'll also say this. This is a great time to learn about Islam for all of us. Find out the difference between Shia and Shiite and Druze and others, and Arab Islam Muslims versus Asian Muslims. And also for us, to ourselves, not take for granted that we know all we need to know about Israel and Zionism, so that we are educated so that we can have that conversation that we're just talking about having. And that what Zionism really is and what it really means and what it doesn't mean. And don't you dare define Zionism for me, a non-Jew. The other thing I would say is, and Rabbi Elliot Dorff wrote in the Jewish Journal 2 weeks ago about this, which is about how do countries become created? Basically in 2 ways. I suppose 4, but 2 ways. 1, warfare or conquest. Every single country, warfare, conquest, or some kind of negotiation, including a sale of land, like the Louisiana Purchase. Every country ever in the world. That's how they come about. Israel is no different as far as that's concerned. There was a war, Israel won. That's why that country is there. And if you want, it was given by God. Other people say we have this land because it was given to us. That's another way that people get land. I also want to say, because it's often the concept of indigenous is another word that I usually take umbrage at, because there was only one person or one group that was there first, only one. And it happened tens of thousands of years before any of us were alive. And human beings have been pushing each other off each other's land for resources since before we were Homo sapiens. You know, for people who want to talk about indigenous, I kind of say, you know what, go watch the opening sequence of 2001: A Space Odyssey again. If you know this, the sequence I'm talking about, called The Dawn of Man. Those are some ways. If that's not going to be heard, then don't say that. I'm saying it in a particularly passionate way. I lecture a lot. If it's a discussion you have with someone, find a way to say what I said in a reasonable, open-hearted way. But the main thing is why it doesn't fit the definition of colonization, and also that Jews have been a presence in the land forever. Something else that I think I will, in terms of, this is also very much a lefty argument about Jews weren't there. You know, there's European immigrants and they're coming over and they've turned themselves into a majority. To which my response is, well, if that's really the way you feel, I want to know how you feel about the fact that California is going to be a majority Latino Hispanic population pretty soon, most of them having immigrated from south of the border. How do you feel about that happening? Because that's no different than what's happened in Israel or any other immigration place. So,
And we have one more question, and then we will end with this question. Aaron, I keep posting photos of the missing because I don't want them to be forgotten. Is that negative? If so, how can we help them and remind people to pray for them?
Karen, thank you for bringing that up, because that is an exception. Absolutely, those should be posted, and anytime anyone rips one down, repost it. Those are an exception to what I was saying before. What I was talking about was the blood, the aftermath, or worse. All you need to do is to read what happened. You know what happened. You, a person, knows. They don't need to see that. And continuing to show someone, continuing to see those photos, it doesn't help. Photos of missing and kidnapped and hostage people, completely different. It's a whole different thing. Keep posting them, reprinting them, put them everywhere. And
Well,
pray for
thank you so much. Tools for peacekeeping within ourselves. I wrote down a few notes. Be a mensch, sit down and calm down. Put the end at the beginning. Do mitzvot. Post photos. Do not lose hope. And I think these were all among other messages you gave us this evening. This was very helpful. For those that registered for this event, Jonathan's presentation will be emailed to you. You did not register and someone forwarded you a link, if you can email the temple office at, I believe it's frontdesk@koltikva.org, and that will get sent along to you. Our next discussion right now is scheduled for November 30th at 7 p.m. We're still working on an agenda, and we're always welcome to ideas, anything that you want to discuss. This was something that was brought up by a lot of people, and I think this time was very well spent. So Jonathan, again, thank you, and thank you to all of you for caring, taking time out of your evening for such an important conversation, and thank you for thinking about Israel.
Thank you for giving me so much of all your time, those of you who stuck around. And Adam, again, not only the presentation, but also the PDF with the references I made are going to be available for everybody. So I thank you all for your attention, and I thank you all for caring. I really do.
Jonathan, thank you for speaking. You did a wonderful job. And I just want to know if other children are going to still be able to go back to their country.
Say that last part again, Victoria.
I said, will Jewish people be able to go back to Israel at all?
Jewish people, did you mean now? You can go now.
No, no. I'm saying when the war is over or anything like that, the children that are not there, will they go back to their school eventually?
I will have to answer that by saying that comes under the I'm not there. I don't know. That's up to the people there.
Okay.
Now, if we care about this, then those, find a place to get involved. One of the links that is in the PDF is to Charity Navigator. Those of you that know about that, which has an extensive list of legitimate places that you can donate or get involved in, both for Israel and for Gaza. So that's my answer to that, is that's up to people that are there.
Well, again, Jonathan, thank you, everybody.
Keep thinking about the day after.
Can I ask a question real quick, Adam?
Sure.
As a religious school teacher, I have a parent who is concerned about sending her child to the temple. And that child has not been there for over 3 weeks. We have told them how secure it is there. What can we do to make them feel that there's no problem? How do I let them know that their child is safe there?
Well, it sounds like you've done all you really can to. My response, this is not my area of expertise, I just want to say, but I would go back to what I said before, is start with why the feeling is there. Not this is how many supports we have, not this is, I mean, those are all real things, but why do you feel the way you do? Why do you feel unsafe? And not in a rhetorical way, really. I really want to know. Please tell me the reasons why you feel unsafe. I want to know where your feeling is coming from and really to hear them out and listen to them. That's where I would start. After that,
They weren't on tonight.
there's only so much you can do, I think, you know. But I would say that to someone that's really afraid, the specifics of security aren't going to matter. Sorry, I shouldn't say aren't going to matter. That's not the overwhelming thing. It's the fear. You know, it's like I see your hand up when it's a little bit. I hope this doesn't sound reductive and snide, and I really don't mean it, but it's trying to tell someone it's okay. You can swim in the ocean. There aren't sharks. You know,
Yeah.
it's at some level, it's part of that kind of fear that you have to deal with, not the reality of how many sharks there are in the square miles of the ocean. So,
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Wayne, I saw you hand up, and then
I don't have a question. I just want to tell you about a billboard that I saw today on Santa Monica Boulevard as I was driving to work in Century City. And it just stated, be a pro-Semite.
Say that
And I
again,
thought-
Wayne.
The billboard said, be a pro-Semite, which I thought
okay,
was,
so let me then let me ask you, Wayne. Let me. What meaning do you take out of that?
I take it, support the Jews. Start, put away your anger. They're not the enemy. Don't be an anti-Semite. Don't be a hater.
Okay.
Be a lover. That's how I took it. And that's hopefully how I feel the billboard is trying to say.
That's great. The reason I ask, and I say this coming out of a lot of teaching of anti-Semitism in terms of where the term actually comes from, I think you're probably right that that's what it means, and I'm not arguing with that. But there are no such thing as Semites, which a lot of people don't know. It's not a peoplehood. There are Semitic languages, and the Jew haters in the 1870s who created the term anti-Semite didn't realize that. They thought Jews were Semites. They hated Jews. They needed to come up with a word that wasn't Jew hatred, so they came up with anti-Semite. So that's the only reason I add that explanation. But in that context of the way we understand Semite now, I think you're probably right. And I think thinking more pro I think it's a great sentiment. Let me just put it that way.
The billboard is a blue background with white letters.
I think in the context of don't be an anti-Semite, be a pro-Semite, I think is excellent. My following academic explanation, I just wanted to be, I was curious as to what the billboard might actually mean.
But I just wanted to share that.
I thank you very much. I thank you very much. It sounds like that is a very positive, helpful message.
And that media campaign is from an organization called Jew Belong. They're actually all over the city. It's Jew Belong that's posting all sorts of messages all over.
I was going to ask. They usually use a bright pink, but
usually pink, exactly.
Yeah, but again, and their thing is really much end Jew hatred. So Jew Belong is a great organization. So again, take my academic explanation, but is not at all questioning the meaning or the sentiment or anything the Jew Belong does, which is great. They're an excellent organization.
So again, everyone, thank you for joining. The PDF as well as the slides will be sent out to all that registered. If not, you can contact the temple office for it. And our next meeting is scheduled for the 30th of November at 7 p.m. We look forward to seeing you there. Again, thank you for joining. And Jonathan, thanks again. We very appreciate it.
Jonathan,
Thank you so much. Thank you,
Adam,
Jonathan.
thank you for putting this together.
Thank you,
Thank you
Jonathan.
all.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
And
Thank
I'll
you
see
very
you
much,
guys
everybody.
tomorrow. Tomorrow's Shabbat.
Yeah.
At Go Tikva.
Yeah, Shabbat Shalom tomorrow. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's also Veterans Night.
Yep. Great. Jonathan, I'll be in touch. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Look
Thank
forward
you,
to hearing
guys.
more
I had
from
a
you,
great
Jonathan.
time
Thank you.
listening.
Adam, thank you for what you're doing, getting the
Yeah.
programs together.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, everybody, for caring,
Yes.
you know.
Oh, well, the news is on at my house 24/7. So,
That's not good.
I
That's
know,
too-
but we can't help it. We can't help it.
Just check in with yourself and make sure, just check in with yourself about it.
We
That's all
do.
I'll say.
My husband had an experience where he was in a position where he was hiring an employee, and she happened to be an African American, and he noticed